the Babble podcast, where we help people decipher confusion, diffuse conflict, define the truth, and discover peace that surpasses understanding. 1 Corinthians 14:33 says, "For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace." Welcome to my Tower of Babel. I'm your host, Bob Morsey. Let's dive right in. So today, I wanted to bring before you guys this very pressing and ongoing matter that's been going on over in the UK. And a little bit of background for you all. This has actually been going on since the late 60s, early 70s. So almost 7 decades of this thing that we're getting ready to talk about has been going on. And if you saw my Instagram post maybe earlier, maybe you looked it up, maybe you found out a little bit about it, maybe you've seen it if you're online at all and pay attention to any news. But if you don't, the thing that I'm talking about is Rupert Lowe, a member of UK's Parliament there in Britain. He has recently been spearheading an operation, an investigation of these rape grooming gangs in the UK that have been, well, going on for these last 60 to 70 years here. And the report basically says that an estimated 250,000, so 250,000 young women and girls have been trafficked, raped, abused, and some of them killed, some of them taken out of the country, and some of them forced into conversion to Islam and married off. So what I wanted to do today is I just wanted to read this 219-page report roughly that Rupert Lowe has compiled here and has released to the public. And with more of this information and more stuff on this to come, basically in the report, that 250,000 is the low estimate. Unfortunately, it's the low estimate. And it's probably way, way worse than that. There's probably many, many more people that are still stuck in this cycle, stuck in the abuse, things that were never reported, and things that just weren't even documented and ignored. And so in this report, he does go after these different public servants and people that turned a blind eye to this, just ignored it, and goes after these criminals, these animals that have done these terrible, horrible, horrific things. As I said earlier in my Instagram post, if you have children that watch this podcast with you, or if you have young teens, generally below the age of 16, I definitely suggest that you don't let any children listen to this. And then if you have teenagers below the age of 16, I suggest parental advisory and discretion. Either watch it with them or watch it yourself first before allowing your young children and teens to watch this, because it gets pretty graphic. It's pretty hard to listen to earlier and to read and just to see these horrible things that were done. And I don't plan to skip a single thing, hardly at all, because I don't want to minimize it. And this is all public information. It's out there, so even the victims and people that were close to the victims that testified to this stuff, it was there for a reason. They want the word to get out. And so I don't want to minimize the situation or make light of it at all. And I just want to do this justice and do this right. One moment, I'm going to turn on my studio lights here that I forgot to turn on. All right, so now that I'm back, we're gonna dive right into this. I'm gonna leave the link. I'm gonna try to leave this link to this document down in the description or in the comments, so that while you guys are watching this, you can follow along. You can read it for yourself. But it's just yeah. I was not expecting to talk about this today, by any means. It's not something that you ever want to have to talk about, but it's the crazy world we live in, and it needs to be talked about. It can't just be glanced over. So let's dive right in. So the first 2 pages is just the title, table of contents. It's actually very well detailed. I was kind of surprised to see that not hardly anything is really like redacted or missing any of the facts or anything like that. Nothing's really being covered up. And I did a little bit of research on this Rupert Lowe, and he seems like a pretty good dude that just wants the best for his country and wants to see things go back to the way they used to be when the world was a little bit of a better place. He wants to see these people brought to justice, and he wants closure for these victims, and he wants to make sure that it doesn't ever happen again, and that the stuff that's still going on gets stopped. So we'll just dive right in. First page is just the acknowledgments. Every witness who volunteered their testimony, whether survivor, parent, whistleblower, politician, or expert, showed courage that made this inquiry possible. Their contributions have ensured that the truth is now a matter of permanent public record. Rupert Lowe, MP's energy and commitment ensured that the rape gang inquiry took place. He has been unwavering in his devotion to making sure that this rotting stain on our country's history, talking about the UK, talking about Britain, has remained firmly in the public eye. Deep gratitude is extended to the entire inquiry team, led by Sammy Woodhouse, Nat Enderby Shenton, Marlon West, Deborah Sudbury, and Julie Balin, worked tirelessly to bring the evidence together and support every survivor who came forward. Special thank you is owed to MPs Esther McVeigh, Nick Timothy, and Carla Lockhart for taking the time to sit on the inquiry panel. Dr. Mark Dury has been extremely generous in enriching the report that follows with his expert knowledge. We are also grateful to Charlie Downs, Joshua Firm, Harrison Pitt, and Graham Smith for their editorial oversight and counsel. Last but not least, we thank the untold thousands across Britain who made all of this possible by donating to ensure that this inquiry could take place. So thank you to all those people that are out there trying to hold these criminals and these people complicit in it responsible, and to get justice for these victims. That's, especially in today's world, takes a lot of courage to do. And so thank you to those people. Forward. Britain doesn't have a racism problem. It has an immigration problem. Rupert Lowe. As is the case with many decent, hardworking Britons, I was unaware of the sheer scale of the evil that has been and continues to be perpetrated by chiefly Pakistani Muslim men against vulnerable young white women and girls in communities up and down our country. But a single court transcript from one such horrific case, amplified by Elon Musk clearly early last year, set in motion a long overdue national reckoning on the matter that inspired over 20,000 British patriots to help fund our rape gang inquiry. What follows is a comprehensive report of its findings. It is essential that all related court documents are securely preserved, both for legal and historical reasons. I am grateful to everyone on my team who has contributed to exposing this demonic chapter in Britain's history, a combination of the paralyzing fear of racism accusations and the scramble for votes from imported foreign subcultures meant that pure evil was allowed to I'm going to butcher this word, metastasize, nor is the horrendous ordeal over. The root cause was immigration, beginning with the British Nationality Act 1948 and escalating under Tony Blair from 1997 onwards, believing proud nations to be responsible for the mid-20th century destruction of Europe. Our post-war leaders embraced diversity and multiculturalism as the supposedly civilized alternative. This report establishes beyond any doubt that this open society obsession has in fact enabled untold barbarism of its own. Oil and water do not mix, and cultural differences going back centuries are the genesis of this problem. I urge all Britons to read this report in full. Lessons need to be learned, and prosecutions need to follow for the appalling cowardice of those responsible for refusing to resist such horrors. The strongest possible penalties, up to and including death, must also be sought for those yet to be properly punished, or indeed punished at all, for their vile, unspeakable crimes. He's absolutely right. And so, like I've said many times in private conversations and even online, whether it be on Twitter or Instagram or wherever, like always, wherever the UK is at politically and as a society, I've always said this, America is like 5 to 10 steps behind them. So if they're there, we're either already there or we're fastly approaching it. Does what he was talking about not sound exactly like what's been happening here? Talking about the multiculturalism, the diversity and inclusion, and all of the immigration and unchecked immigration, as well as the illegal immigration going on that plagued Europe and has now brought a very disastrous problem such as this to their country, where their people, like actual British people, are just being raped and abducted. Sounds very, very similar to stuff that's going on here or that we're approaching to here in America. The next page says, "The world is a dangerous place to live, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it." And that is a quote by Albert Einstein. He's absolutely right. The world is not a dangerous place to live because there are dangerous people. It's when the good people do nothing to stop these dangerous people. It is the duty of every good citizen and anybody that considers themselves to be a person of morals to protect the innocent and to bring about justice and truth and light to the darkness. That is like one of our top 10 duties to be within a society if we are to function and not to all just give in to these horrible, evil, horrific acts and this stuff. There's another quote on here. "Man is the cruelest animal" by Friedrich Nietzsche. And that's very true. We can often be very, very cruel, and oftentimes the cruelest things that happen in life are people being cruel to one another, and that's something that we must work very, very hard to speak out against and to stop and to do our best to limit it. Otherwise, it'll be, the consequences for that are just disastrous. So, all right, now it's time for the introduction here, and this is where it really starts to just pick up and get interesting. And they're going to talk a little bit how they compiled this and started moving towards figuring out who was doing this stuff and why. So, here we go. The Rape Gang Inquiry has now concluded the first phase of its work. It was established to examine one of the most horrendous scandals in the long history of our country, the systemic targeting of vulnerable girls, overwhelmingly white British, by predominantly Muslim Pakistani gangs across towns and cities up and down the nation. When they say predominantly, and I think later on maybe they have some percentages in here, but the percentages were literally 95% of these people were these Pakistani Muslims, and then some of the other remaining 5% were people of Muslim background from other countries and other ethnicities, and then maybe a very, very small, less than 1% of them were just random, and didn't have the relation to the Muslim background, but it's pretty much these Pakistani Muslims. 95 to like 99% of them. The evidence presented throughout the hearings confirmed what had long been known, but repeatedly denied by many in the political class. The inquiry welcomed girls, boys, men, and women of all races and religions to testify to their experiences to gain a complete picture of the rape gang phenomenon. The Casey report of 2025 stated that disproportionate numbers of men from Asian ethnic backgrounds, so South Asia, so that would be including the Middle East, which is where a lot of these Pakistani Muslims would be coming from and what their ethnicity would be, were among the suspects for group-based child sexual exploitation, or CSE. Baroness Casey quoted local reports showing that a significant proportion of those convicted were of Pakistani and/or Muslim heritage. The crime stretched back generations. Obviously, generations, since it's been going on since they started letting these people in 1948. The Rape Gang Inquiry was necessary because the state and its institutions have failed catastrophically over decades. Police, social services, schools, the NHS, licensing authorities, and governments allowed these gangs to operate with impunity. There was a demonstrable lack of political will to confront them. The Labour Party initially refused a public inquiry altogether, only relenting under considerable pressure. It will be many years before this inquiry is complete, and there is no guarantee that it will adequately address the politically sensitive, ethno-religious nature of the phenomenon. Despite now pushing for an inquiry in opposition, when in government the Conservative Party did very little. The Rape Gang Inquiry was survivor-led. Every day the panel sat with Sammy Woodhouse, a survivor-turned-activist herself, alongside a variety of experts who attended whenever their specialist subject formed the focus of our efforts to get to the truth. We examined distinct areas of the scandal in turn so that a maximally full picture could be established. Parents and carers described their experiences, instances of pregnancy, abortion, and children born of rape were laid bare. Whistleblowers who had previously been ignored gave evidence. Policing and justice failures were documented. Social care, NHS services, including sexual health and mental health, education, taxi licensing, demographic trends, cultural and social issues, and ideological obstructions to justice were all scrutinized without restriction. Nothing was off the table. Misguided political correctness and cultural sensitivities played no part in the proceedings. The promise made to every donor was honored in full. The truth was pursued and justice was our only objective. You know, that's kind of rare. When this stuff has been coming out lately and these different things, you see things censored, you see things that are off the table that are limited, kind of like when they were releasing all the Epstein files several months back. And stuff was redacted, people were still protected, justice wasn't pursued, you didn't see these people being tried, you didn't see hardly anybody arrested, nothing happened with it. Here stuff's actually happening. So that's a nice sight. And obviously, this Sammy Woodhouse, she was a victim herself, she survived, and then she turned activist. That's like, we need more people like that out there in the world that refuse to give up, that refuse to just be the victim. So good for her. That's awesome. Love to see people like that. It's terrible that what happened to her, and she should have never had to been put in this position. But obviously, she's making the best of it and trying to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else. So that's what we like to see, and that's good. So, and obviously, there's just other evils that come out of this that were just absolutely terrible. Obviously, with some people either having forced abortions, which they end up talking about later, and then also people that, you know, survived and escaped that chose to abort the child. And no matter the circumstances of one's conception, it does not determine their worth and value as a human being. I will always be a supporter of life and pro-life in that, and so that's always sad to see, and just a terrible outcome, and two wrongs don't make a right, but not to blame the victims for anything. And we'll probably end up doing a podcast episode on abortion and why people ought to be pro-life, and just talk about the importance and the value of it. Alright, we'll continue. Survivors were finally given the platform they had been denied for so long, and were central to the inquiry. The full scale and nature of the crimes can now be placed on the public record. The true horror of what took place is no longer hidden. So the truth is coming out, and the truth always comes out, because it gets hard to keep telling lies, and good will always win. Evil can't win, can't prevail against good. I'm gonna grab a charger real quick here for this computer. All right. So yeah. So none of these details were spared. Pretty much all of the details in graphic detail came out. So although the inquiry lacked statutory powers, the response was overwhelming. Politicians, whistleblowers, experts, family members, and many others came forward. Those few in prominent positions who declined to give evidence did so knowing that their refusal would be noted. So the people that refused to come out and talk, they knew that they were going to be exposed, that they did not talk or that they were reluctant to talk. So those people are noted in here too. So you know who was maybe complicit in it, or that was still too afraid, too much of a coward to come forward with the information that they had. They're being held accountable for that too. So ain't nobody escaping this, ain't nobody getting out. So that's good. This report sets out findings and makes clear recommendations for how the problem of rape gangs can be eradicated. The country now knows the full truth. The country has been given the basis for justice. The country has the roadmap to ensure these crimes never happen again. And we'll for sure talk about that and talk about how the U.S. can definitely take steps to ensure this stuff doesn't happen, or if it is happening, how we can expose it, and how we can ensure that it doesn't happen here, or that it gets stopped and doesn't happen again. This is now the executive summary. The Rape Gang Inquiry examined the systematic targeting of vulnerable girls, overwhelmingly white British by predominantly Muslim Pakistani gangs across towns and cities throughout the United Kingdom. The evidence put to the inquiry confirms that this scandal constitutes one of the most horrendous... Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm just rereading. Yeah, I think I am. Maybe not. Alright. By predominantly Muslim Pakistani gangs across towns and cities throughout the United Kingdom. The evidence put to the inquiry confirms that this scandal constitutes one of the most horrendous failures in the history of the country. Organized networks of perpetrators built coordinated operations that transported victims between locations, supplied them with drugs and alcohol, recorded abuse for distribution and blackmail, and passed girls between multiple adult men. These crimes have been committed for decades, since the 1950s, by Pakistanis in particular, and have affected every region of our nation. So since the 1950s, this has been going on. 1950s. So even earlier than I had stated earlier. So since the 1950s. So over 7 decades of this stuff has been going on. It's terrible, it's horrible. The scale of the crimes committed is staggering. It has been previously established that at the very least 250,000, not 250, not 2,500, 250,000, a quarter of a million. Young white girls have been subjected to repeated rape, gang rape, trafficking, torture, pregnancy, forced Islamic conversion, and lifelong trauma. Well, no duh. Sure, it's lifelong trauma. How do you recover from that? The true number is probably higher. They say probably higher. Yeah, no, it's definitely higher. The perpetrators bear primary responsibility, yet the institutional failures that enabled them for decades must also be confronted. In court records and official inquiries, around 87% of those convicted in these group-based child sexual exploitation cases bore distinctively Muslim names. The vast majority of men involved in these gangs were not convicted. Dr. Taj Harji, an imam with the Oxford Islamic Congregation, believes the true proportion of gang members who are Muslims to be around 95%. This figure far exceeds the Muslim share of the overall United Kingdom population. The overwhelming majority of the rape gang networks consisted entirely of men from Muslim backgrounds, predominantly of Pakistani heritage, although smaller groups from Somalia, Iranian, Syrian, Turkish, and other Muslim origins were also involved. it may be safe to say that if 95% of them were Pakistani Muslim, and then the other ones were also of Muslim background, just from different places other than Pakistan, maybe 100% of them were Muslim. That is an overwhelming majority compared to their share of the population. Overwhelming. It seems like one small percentage group of the population is the source of the biggest problem. That's ridiculous. The inquiry heard harrowing testimony from survivors and their families. The method used to groom children typically followed the same process. Girls as young as 11 were initially befriended by a young Muslim man who then treated the young child like an adult and would then start providing them with alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes. After a few months, the girls would then be collected from school gates, care homes, and streets in taxis. They were taken to house flats, restaurants, and hotels where they were raped repeatedly by groups of men, tortured, filmed for blackmail, and told they were white trash or kuffar who merited punishment. Many became pregnant while still children, some miscarried under trauma, others endured coerced abortions, and some gave birth to children who were later removed by the state. We found that the same unspeakable crimes occurred in at least 149 local authority districts, close to 40% of all such districts across the United Kingdom. And they have later on in page 14 for a full map of this. So when you go to look at this, you can actually look at the map of these different districts in which they found this stuff and exactly see what they're talking about when they say 40% of the country, of the kingdom, you know. Survivors described daily rapes, red rooms of extreme torture, trafficking between cities, and institutional disbelief that compounded their suffering. Some girls were even trafficked to the Middle East where they would endure Islamic marriage. This is so hard to read, guys. It breaks my heart, and it brings me nothing but fury and outrage. If you're sitting here watching this, offended at the things I'm about to say, or offended that I am pointing out that all of them, all of these perpetrators and all of these criminalistic animals are Pakistani and Muslim. And you're saying, oh, that's offensive. Oh, that's politically incorrect. You're almost just as bad. No, this is horrible. This is absolutely horrible what they've done to these girls. They are targeting predominantly white British girls. Pretty much only who they're targeting. So who's the actual racist here? If we have to argue about what's actually morally wrong, calling these people out and actually describing them for who they are, or them raping young girls and women. They're animals. They're absolute animals. This is also something that if you are in the UK still, or if you are in the US where we currently have more and more Muslims as a predominant part of the population within the area. Like here in Michigan, we got the Muslims up in Dearborn, or if you're in New York, where even your mayor of your city is Zohran Mamdani, who is a Muslim, okay, and you're seeing these larger Muslim populations move into the area. You should be aware of this stuff because, like I said at the beginning, we're probably only about 5 to 10 steps behind the UK as far as where they're at, and that's if we're not there already. So, and this just goes just even for people that aren't even acting in gangs. It's the same method that they use with all of them. So if you have young children, especially you young women out there, and especially if you have young girls, daughters, and nieces and friends and stuff, make sure that you're teaching them how to be safe. Make sure that you're keeping them safe. Make sure that they know that if some strange man or a strange group of men are being overly friendly or trying to give them things, trying to give them experiences even, or take them places, or especially if they're being offered drugs, that they know to say no and to run away, to get away from there as fast as possible. The best way to stop this stuff from happening is to avoid it. In the same way that you would not go walking around the bad side of town at night alone, it's the same thing that applies. It's common sense. It's like look both ways before you cross the street. You gotta get away from these people. And if you happen to live in one of these areas, where some of this stuff possibly very easily could be happening, just be extra cautious, be aware. That's part of the reason for talking about this stuff. But yeah, so. But they were forced not only into this abuse and this trafficking, but then some of them were actually trafficked to the Middle East. They were removed from their country, from their home, not only abused, but then forced into conversion to another religion, and then forced into marriage. That's it's disgusting. It's terrible. The demographic and cultural drivers are clear. Perpetrators from Pakistani Muslim and other Muslim backgrounds operated under an honor and shame-based clan code that treated non-Muslim girls, especially white working-class girls, as property available for sexual use. So they're treating them, these non-Muslim, predominantly white working-class girls, as less than human. They're treating them like property. When you get to the point where you start treating other human beings as property, like slavery, forced marriages, forced Islamic conversion, and forced abuse, when you start doing that to another human being, you are not human anymore. That is some of the most inhumane things you can do as a person. I'm going to lower my mic a little bit. You are inhumane at that point. Inhumane at that point. You are no longer a human. You are causing great pain with malicious intent. animalistic. It's terrible, it's evil, and God hates it. This pattern was reinforced by 8 theological and legal aspects of Islam. So it's all connected to Islam and their ideology. It's connected to the religion, to what the core beliefs of their society is. This is what they believe. Some of them don't even think they're wrong for doing this. They think it's right. There's no reasoning with these people. They're violent. The only thing they understand is violence. These include the doctrine of Muslim superiority drawn from Quranic verses that position Muslims at the top with a duty to correct non-believers. The gang members' justification for their crimes can be found in the Islamic principles of loyalty and disavowal, known as, I'm going to butcher this, but frankly I don't care, al-wala wal-bara. It demands enmity towards non-Muslims. The superiority of men over women, forced marriage combined with the absence of any fixed minimum age of consent. The perception of female sexuality as inherently dangerous, a system of sex slavery that authorizes sexual relations with non-Muslim captives, and a religiously sanctioned social hierarchy that subjugates conquered non-Muslims. These elements, filtered through clannish immigrant subcultures, provided religious justification that enabled the systemic rape and even slaughter of white British girls. So they're justifying it via their religion, and don't discount that part in there that where is it? The absence of any fixed minimum age of consent. So they don't believe young children are off limits as sexual partners. So not only are they rapists and murderers who treat non-Muslims as no more than cattle and slaves to be used, but they're also a bunch of freaking pedophiles. They're a bunch of pedophiles. Last time I checked, the Bible had something to say about it would be better for a millstone to be hung about their neck than for them to offend one of these little ones. Talking about children. They deserve a millstone about their neck and to be cast into the sea. And yet, Britain and the U.S. alike and Western civilization were letting these people that believe in enmity towards us non-Muslims. They have violence and intentions of only harm and evil against us. We let them into our country thinking, oh hey, they'll be civilized like us. Diversity is a strength. And you have these liberals shouting it from the rooftops. Equality and equity for all. Diversity is a strength. Oh, don't be Islamophobic. Let these people in. Oh, it's just their religion. Oh, coexist. No, you can't coexist with somebody that wants to kill you. They want to kill you. They want to take your women in your life and use them as sex slaves. They want to take your children and rape them, kill them, slaughter them. This is what these people believe. They're animals. Their religious hierarchy in their mosque support it. They openly state it. They carry around their Quran and they literally read this book as their guidelines. That's not a peaceful religion. The Muslims are not for peace. They don't want to coexist here. They don't want a better life for themselves. They only want to conquer you. They believe that you should either be conquered and turned into slaves or converted to Islam, or that you ought to be killed. That's what they believe. That's what they think. That's what they want. And it's horrible. It's horrible. And it's not just one or two of them. It's not just a few extremists within their religion. No. This is what they all believe. This is what they all want. Some of them will pretend to be a little bit more mild. They'll be there just to kind of invade the country, to get you used to their presence. And then guess what? Their brothers from overseas come in. Their other people, their cousins, the people that claim to have the same religion as them come in here, and it's like a Trojan horse. You just let in the army, and now they don't have to conquer you with the sword. They just conquer you by invading your country. They use words like Islamophobia to disarm you. They call you a racist. They call you a bigot. They call you intolerant. They use your own values and they dictate them to you even though they themselves don't believe or operate by them. You cannot let your enemies dictate your values to you and then change the laws that you have used to govern yourselves to only protect themselves and to enable them to rape and pillage and lay waste to your society. That's what's happening. That's what's happening over there in the UK. That's what's happening here in America right now. It's happening. It's getting there. It might not be as extreme as it is over there across the Atlantic Ocean, but it's getting there. Were Britain functioning effectively, these girls would have received considerable state protection. However, every one of our institutions failed them catastrophically. Police forces ignored repeated reports, criminalized victims instead of perpetrators. So they're ignoring the victims, they're criminalizing them, and accusing the victim instead of going after these perpetrators. They destroyed evidence. These are the police forces. They destroyed evidence and allowed no rapist to walk free on bail. Social care services undermine protective parents, place children in trafficking hubs inside children's homes, closed cases despite clear indicators of exploitation, and retaliated against whistleblowers. So these are the public servants. The social workers, the police officers that are supposed to protect these people, that are supposed to protect these victims, that are supposed to go catch these perpetrators and bring them to justice. And they're doing the exact opposite. They're letting the perpetrators, the criminals, the animals go free, and they're locking the victim in the cage. They're handing the victim right back to the offenders. How's that for justice? Oh, that's just great. The NHS recorded genital injuries, multiple sexually transmitted infections in children as young as 13, pregnancies caused by rape, and suicide attempts, yet discharged victims back to their abusers without safeguarding, referrals, or trauma care. Schools observed older men collecting girls at the gates, heard disclosures of rape on school premises, and responded by excluding victims rather than protecting them. Taxi licensing authorities renewed permits for drivers who formed the logistical backbone of the networks and collapsed in the face of organized protests when basic safety measures were proposed. Oh, so that's even better. The schools, the people that are supposed to be for the education of these children, that are supposed to help protect these children and keep them away from a life of drugs and abuse, and are supposed to educate them and give them the advantages to have a better life. They're excluding these victims. They know what's going on, and they push them away. They push them away from community, so no wonder there were suicide attempts earlier. No wonder these people stay trapped in the cycles of abuse, because they have no one to turn to and nowhere to go. Like the quote said earlier, the problem in the world is not with the dangerous people. It's when the good people do nothing to stop the dangerous people. And if you're not doing anything to stop the dangerous people, can you really consider yourself good? Or are you just a bystander, complicit with what's going on? You're not a good person if you don't stand up to the evil that you see. You're not. At best, you're the rabbit watching the other rabbit get eaten. But when it's the police, when it's the social workers, the people that do have the power to do something about it for real, and they don't, you're just a coward. You actually are the Islamophobe because you're more afraid of the Muslim calling you mean names than you are worried about the actual justice, that you are more worried about how you will be perceived in the public eye in the next election as a politician than you are about protecting the citizens of your country that were actually born there, that you share a background with. And then, even better, licensing authorities for like taxis and, travel agencies and stuff renewed these other Pakistani and Muslim men's licenses that were helping transport these girls around town and traffic them. And then, the police aren't stopping them, the licensing places are enabling them to have the vehicles and the transportation to traffic them. So that's even better. Gotta love that. Political failure lies at the heart of the scandal. Successive governments lacked the will to confront the ethnic and religious patterns. The Labour Party bears particular responsibility. It initially refused a public inquiry and only relented under pressure by ordering a process viewed with widespread skepticism. So, there's at least one ray of sunshine in this whole thing, and that's that the people can still win. The government still has to bend to the will of the people if there's enough of us. It's like the ants versus the grasshoppers in a bug's life. So we can still win. We can still overcome the evil if enough of us speak out and make aware of this and advocate for the change. Which is why it's so important that we do that. Labor-dominated councils and MPs were briefed on the gangs long ago, yet later denied knowledge. Of course they did. Sounds kind of familiar. All these politicians knew about Epstein. They knew about the sex trafficking in the country, and what did they all do? They all play the blame game. They all deny having knowledge about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Oh, even if they weren't directly involved, they're not going to talk about it because they're too afraid of the backlash. They're too afraid of these other people. They're not pleasing the people, that's for sure. They're not serving the people. That's a problem. The party prioritized electoral reliance on Muslim voting blocs and then blocked or watered down inquiries, suppressed ethnicity data, and framed legitimate concerns as far-right agitation. So, not only did they know about it, claimed and denied having knowledge about it, but then they were silencing the inquiries because they were more worried about getting the votes from these Muslims that were running these gangs, that were running these sex trafficking rings. They were more worried about the votes and the electoral stuff so that they could stay in power. Well, here's a solution for you, you cowards. If you deport them all and you prosecute them all, there'll be less of them in the population in the voting blocks. And then maybe the actual rest of the people will like you because you're upholding the law, you're serving the people well, and you're doing what you ought to be doing in the office as a public servant. And then you don't have to rely on it. So it's not that you just knew about it and you were afraid of losing the votes. No, you were absolutely complicit in it because you're just as evil. You dirty scumbags. You're a bunch of cowards. And if it's not cowardice, then it's straight up evil. And you may as well have been involved and done the act yourself. You ought to lose your job and you ought to go to prison for a very, very, very long time. And then they blamed it on far-right agitation. Kind of sounds like it was going on here. People are advocating for change. Oh, we don't want to send any more money to Israel. Oh, we want the Muslims and Islam out of the country. Oh, we want the illegals gone. Oh, that's far-right extremism. We don't want any more wars over in foreign countries. Oh, that's far-right extremism. No, actually, in fact, it's pretty reasonable. In fact, it was what was kind of promised by the Republican Party before they got into office, and then what they do, they went back on every single one of those promises because they're just like the rest of the politicians. They all lie. It's two wings of the same bird. Yeah, so not a fan. Not a fan of this stuff going on here because it's going on over here too, in the U.S. in the same boat. Just beautiful. When finally forced to act, the Labour government produced a national inquiry whose tightly drawn terms of reference deliberately excluded systemic examination of the demographic, cultural, and religious drivers. So then when they finally do, and they're pressured into creating this inquiry because the people are really, really upset and they still outnumber these Muslims, they're still protecting these people. They're literally caught in the act of protecting these monsters. Like how low can you be, right? How low can you be? Seems like they can get pretty low. This gets lower, gets lower. The Conservative Party, while in government, continued with Labour's approach and failed to impose mandatory ethnicity recording or launch a full statutory inquiry, despite clear evidence from Rotherham and elsewhere. Scottish political parties have refused a dedicated inquiry and failed to record offender ethnicity, political correctness, fear of accusations of racism, and fear of losing electoral support from certain demographics have taken precedence over the protection of British children. Anytime your job is more important to you, your job, your power, your money is more important to you than protecting the innocence and lives of children. That should be a big red flag that you are approaching that non-human category. I don't care who you are. If you don't want to protect the innocence and lives of children, then there's no sitting across the table from you. You're a monster, you're evil, you're horrible, and there should probably be a lot of things happening to stop you from ever being in a position of power or ever actually being a part of society again. Starting with your job. They should lose their jobs for these, and I hope they do. I hope they get voted out. I hope they get shunned from society. I kind of hope that over there in Britain, I hope they denaturalize these people and send them to the people that they so claim to support and love. I hope they send not only a majority of these Pakistanis, the ones that they don't end up executing, because I really hope they do, bring in the death penalty for these rapists and these murderers. But for the ones that they end up sending back via deportation, I hope they denaturalize these people that were protecting them, and send them back with them. See how they actually like the Muslim culture over there. Because I guarantee you, the Muslims really don't care about them or like them either. They're just kind of using them as a free ride to get what they want. So yeah, there's always that, and it'll come back to bite them. You reap what you sow, so they deserve whatever's coming to them, and eventually they'll most likely also have the wrath of God come down upon them. So that's good too. It's good to know that good will win and that justice will come to these people. Fear of political correctness and accusations of racism. Cowards. Just cowards. Whistleblowers, parents, and survivors who came forward showed extraordinary courage despite having been met in the past with disbelief and intimidation. So they're intimidating and discrediting the victims. Classic. The perpetrators operated with impunity because the state enabled them. So what they've been saying here is the state and the systems of the government have been enabling these people. They enabled them to come into the country, whether legally or illegally, and then they enabled them to do whatever crimes they so wished without being arrested. So that's a big problem. The evidence now demands immediate and decisive action to eradicate the problem, deliver justice for the victims, and ensure these abhorrent crimes are eradicated from our shores. Yes, eradicate them. Do it. Yes. And now let's just make this clear. I'm not advocating for vigilante justice or anything of the such. That's not how we do things. That would make us almost no better than they are. Of course, we would still have the moral high ground, but I'm not advocating for vigilante justice. No, I'm advocating for these governments to change their policies and to bring back capital punishment, aka the death penalty and life imprisonment sentences. If they're bringing back the death penalty, can they throw in just a teeny bit of torture for these people, because that's kind of what they did to their victims. I'm not really for an eye for an eye in almost every scenario, 99% of cases, but these kinds of cases, I'm for it. Shh. Alright, so we now have a clearer sense of the problem. There are a number of measures necessary to resolve them. up to and including considerable changes to our criminal justice system, the passage of legislation aimed at targeting specifically gang-based CSE, which is child sexual exploitation, and a great amount of institutional overhaul. Yes, yes. Passing legislation to go after these monsters and to go after the monsters that created the problem, that let these monsters do what they want. These people that are saying they're afraid of the accusations of racism, they're afraid of the backlash of the problem that they have created. They're like Dr. Einstein being afraid, not Einstein, Frankenstein. They're like Dr. Frankenstein being afraid of the monster that he's created. He's afraid of the monster. And they created it. That's the irony. And so, not only are they going to go after these perpetrators, these criminals, these animals, but they're also going to go get the people in the institutions and the things within the institution, the statutes and laws, and they're going to correct those. So that's good. Our detailed list of recommendations includes improved data recording on ethno-religious patterns among offenders, far stronger sentencing, a comprehensive deportation effort. Yes, this is based. They can't commit the crimes if they're not here. Institutional accountability measures, multi-agency coordination, specialist training, enhanced safeguarding through greater family involvement. Yes, bring back the family. We need a higher value on family. 2-parent households. Okay, raising children well. Protecting your children. Raising them right. Not broken families. Greater family involvement and closing the various gaps in British law through which so many victims fell. Yes, tighten down the rules a bit, making sure that these victims, when it does occur and happen, that they have the support they need, that justice will be brought to the situation, and that they will have the support to recover. Yes, this is what we like to see. Following the publication of this report, we intend to release the full witness testimonies, gather additional survivor accounts, identify those responsible, hold on, my computer glitched out for a second here. There we go. Okay. Following the publication of this report, we intend to release the full witness testimonies, gather additional survivor accounts, identify those responsible in Parliament, and begin civil and private legal actions to ensure maximal accountability. So even the people that they can't get underneath the law legally with punishment, they are going to sue these people for their negligence. The victims, the people, and they're going to sue them out the wazoo. So all the money, all the support that they thought they were going to get, they are going to be sued for the rest of their life, and hopefully they will be imprisoned. All of them. Let's go get these monsters. All right, now this is the overview of crimes on page 12. We might be coming to an end. This is becoming a very, very long podcast. We might do a part 2 if you people ask for that, but we probably once we get to the part where we read some of the actual victims' accounts and stuff, we will we'll probably only read one of those, and not all of them, because it's very painful to read, and it will be there for you all to read later, unless you guys request down in the comments that you want me to read more of it. But this is the overview of crimes section here. And so we'll start reading that. Rape gangs have exploited children systemically across every region of the United Kingdom for decades. The independent chair of the Centre for Excellence for Children's Care and Protection, Alexis J., has identified the 1970s as the decade when immigrant rape gangs first began tormenting the girls of Britain. However, the British newspaper archive reveals that the first recorded case of specifically Pakistani rape gangs dates back to 1955, when 4 Bradford-based Pakistanis were charged with raping a 15-year-old girl from Middlesbrough. This was soon after former colonial subjects from the subcontinent as much as the Caribbean became eligible to enter the United Kingdom in non-trivial numbers under the British Nationality Act of 1948. What began as singular and small-scale instances became systemic and industrial over time. When you let one of these things slide and you don't crack down on it immediately, and you keep letting these people in greater numbers, it's just going to keep happening. If you tell a child, don't steal from the cookie jar because here's the consequences for it, and you have a camera watching said cookie jar so they know that you know it's going to happen, right, if they do it. They take from the cookie jar, they know it's on camera, they know that they're going to be punished for it, but then you don't punish them for it, what are they going to do? They're going to maybe take another cookie. They still don't get punished for it. They go tell their siblings, hey, look, we can actually take from this cookie jar, and nothing happens. Then, all 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 children are all eating from that cookie jar without consequences. And it becomes a problem. You've raised a bunch of thieves. You've let a bunch of thieves in. And their thief ideology has been cemented. The same thing is happening with these Muslim Pakistanis over there in Britain. And like I said, if it's happening over there, there's a high likelihood that it's happening over here too. The horrific crimes have only escalated in recent decades, especially following Tony Blair's 1997 victory and the start of orchestrated mass immigration. With great numbers came greater opportunities for abuse. Perpetrators built organized networks that transported victims between towns and cities and passed girls between multiple adult men. So this isn't just 1 or 2, no, this is a large and vast majority of them. They are creating networks, systems, organized. The only thing worse than individual actors in crime is organized crime. It's a lot harder to stop. It's greater in mass scale. And this isn't, they're running some political corruption, they're robbing banks, they're having gang wars. No. They're finding innocent, vulnerable, white girls, and young women, and then they are abusing them, subjecting them to drugs and alcohol, and they are raping them. That is the definition of evil, folks. It's evil. Don't let this be normalized. Don't become desensitized to this. This is evil. It cannot be allowed to slide. In each of these areas, the same tactics were used. Girls as young as 11 were targeted with gifts, alcohol, and drugs collected in taxis from school gates, care homes, and streets and taken into houses, flats, restaurants, and hotels, and then raped repeatedly by groups of men, passed between perpetrators, trafficked across country lines, and in many cases impregnated or forced into abortions. Most victims endured violence, were filmed for blackmail, or told they were white trash or kuffar who deserved punishment. These people treat the non-Muslims like they're not people. They don't respect us. They don't respect human life. That's a problem. The ideology gap is too wide. You can't reason with these people. This is what they believe. This is what many of them have been indoctrinated with. You can't change their minds. Only an act of God can maybe do that. And that's still very few and far in between. People that aren't looking for the truth won't find it. Because they're not looking for it. They like being blind. They like being evil. They serve a sand demon. Okay? They follow a book written by a false prophet who represented a sand demon. Okay? If I had a Quran right here right now, I'd maybe start tearing it up and burning it. Just to show you my disgust with these people and with this religion. The authorities at every level, including the police, social services, health services, schools, licensing bodies, and politicians, knew the patterns, possessed the intelligence. So they knew the patterns, they possessed the intelligence, and still failed to protect the country's children. The evidence establishes that a national scandal of repeated rape, trafficking, torture, pregnancy, forced Islamic conversion, and lifelong trauma, enabled by institutional denial, political calculation, and fear of the accusation of racism, took place over decades. So this has been going on for quite a while. It's probably still going on right now. They haven't caught them all yet. It's still going on. It's probably going on over here. When are we going to put an end to it? The incidents of criminal activities listed in this report are drawn from court records, official and unofficial inquiries across the country, and witness-provided testimonies. To the inquiry, they confirm that this was never a series of isolated local failures. It was a coordinated nationwide pattern of organized child sexual exploitation that repeated in town after town, city after city, from the far north to the south coast. The same ethnic and religious profile of the perpetrators was documented throughout almost all of the witnesses who contacted the inquiry. It's not racism to call these people out on it. It's not. This is, these people, they're demonic. They gotta be stopped, alright. It's not racism to point out the hallmarks of this group of people, these trademarks of this group of people. They're Muslim, 100% of them in these gangs. They're all Muslims, every time. Not all of them were Pakistani, but hey, most of them were. Yeah. So, The scale of the rape gang phenomenon is endemic across the entirety of Britain. The 250,000 figure originates directly from a statement in the House of Lords by Lord Pearson of Rannoch on 14th of May 2019. So this was back in 2019 when this figure came out. Do the government accept that if we extrapolate nationally the J report on Rotherham and other reports, Telford and Oxford, there appear to have been upwards of 250,000 young white girls raped in this century, very largely by Muslim men, usually several times a day for years. Several times a day for years. He added that this number is probably an underestimate. An underestimate. No kidding. Okay. And now that number is probably exploded even higher. Obviously, as it's been almost, we're about less than 3 years away from 10 years from that date. So, yeah, it's been over half a decade since that came out. The extrapolation now has greater support due to further data that has been collected derived from scaling the patterns documented in major inquiries. The Rotherham J report in 2014, at least 1,400 girls abused between 1997 and 2013, with some updated estimates exceeding this. Perpetrators were overwhelmingly Pakistani Muslim men. Well, just the same thing over and over again. Pakistani Muslim men. Seems like they're the ones doing it. Telford Inquiry 2022, more than 1,000 children, predominantly girls. So this isn't even limited to the girls. There were some young boys that were subjected to this stuff. So not only are they rapists, murderers, sex traffickers, physical and sexual abusers, getting these children and women hooked on drugs and alcohol as part of the abuse, but they're also homosexuals because they're doing it with young boys too. Well, that's always great, just adding to the things wrong with this. National footprint. The grooming gang model has been confirmed in dozens of towns and cities. Our independent inquiry, led by Rupert Lowe, MP, has heard evidence demonstrating coordinated operations extending to all corners of the country in at least 149 local authority districts. So this is going on in their entire country. I guarantee you it's probably going on in the U.S. Don't be surprised when it comes out in a few years, or when it starts being a thing. Don't be surprised. Calling it right now. Don't be surprised when you're seeing it happen right here in the U.S. Or I guess that when it comes out that it's happening here in the U.S. I really hope it's not, but that's probably the likelihood. When the Rotherham-Telford scale is applied across the documented national distribution and multiplied by the extreme underreporting factor accepted by official reviews, the total reaches the 250,000 threshold as a bare minimum. A bare minimum, guys. So, 250,000 as a bare minimum. You might be able to scale it up to 1 million. You might be able to scale it up. Probably. And if you take the high likelihood that it's happening over here too, it's probably easily 1 million, if not more. We are far from grasping the full extent of grooming gang criminality in modern Britain. It is reasonable to assume that since sexual abuse of all kinds tends to be underreported, this is also true of grooming gangs. The Independent has reported that almost 19,000 children were identified as sexual exploitation victims in England in 1 year alone, despite the reluctance of state actors to name or tackle the problem of the rape gangs. After decades of abuse, victims must number in the hundreds of thousands. The full scale is not yet known. It's heartbreaking. Every major review has emphasized that recorded statistics severely understate reality. They just list 2 different cases with a little bit of words talking about how it's kind of impossible to know the actual numbers and to know the scale of this stuff. The second one that they have listed here says it's the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse and multiple local inquiries, 2022 to 2025. It is simply not possible to know the scale because ethnicity, group offending, and historical cases were routinely unrecorded or shelved to protect community cohesion. Oh, so not protecting children supports community cohesion. That's a load of bull crap. And the people using community cohesion as an excuse to justify why they didn't do anything about this, why they didn't speak up or put a stop to this, deserve to be imprisoned for life and maybe, as aiders and abettors of this crime, ought to be given the same fate that these criminals, these animals get, which should be the death penalty. I personally think not only should it be the death penalty, but it should be public execution as a nice deterrent for people to never do this again. Never again. Overleaf is a heat map that portrays the various locations in which the inquiry can be sure the rape gangs operated. It is likely that the true extent is far worse. And here on, well, at least in my document, my copy of it, and digital copy, it actually has this map on page 15, even though in the document it says it's page 14. But yeah, that's a lot of places within the country. Almost all of it covered from top to bottom, where this stuff was going on. And it's probably going on in the other places too, but mainly the cities. Mainly the populated areas. It's where they could get away with it. That's where you can find the most victims. Right there. The scale, the tactics, the perpetrator profile, and the systemic inaction were almost always identical everywhere. Britain did not face dozens of separate local scandals. It faced one national scandal that the state allowed to grow for decades. So, although I would not necessarily say that maybe this is going on in the entirety of the U.S., it's probably going on in at least several states. Most likely, I mean, obviously, it covered all of Britain, so we're letting in these Muslims in far greater numbers than they are, because obviously we're a bigger country. So, I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised at all if it was going on in maybe even bigger numbers here than there. But that is yet to come out, that is yet to be exposed. I hope not, but highly likely. London stands exposed as the epicenter of institutional denial in the grooming gang scandal. So again, these aren't just rape gangs, these are grooming rape gangs. Okay? They're not just finding these people in different alleys, they're not just trafficking them. No. They're finding these vulnerable, susceptible people, they're grooming them into thinking that it's okay or to being more open to it, and then they are raping them. And then they are blackmailing them and brainwashing them and convincing them, these victims, that they are the problem or that they actually want to be involved in this. That's evil. It's terrible. While northern towns faced public inquiries after the truth emerged, the capital maintained a wall of silence for years. The mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, oh, look at that, that's pretty Arabic sounding name there. I wonder what his religion is. Has repeatedly insisted there were no grooming gangs operating in the city. Oh really? It's going on everywhere else, but not here. As our inquiry heard from Susan Hall, leader of the Conservatives in the London Assembly, the rape gang phenomenon is in fact endemic within the capital. So everybody else knows about it, but not him. Oh, he's going to stay in denial. After challenging Khan about the presence of such gangs in London, Hall was inundated with calls from women and girls purporting to be victims of their predation. Khan describes evidence from whistleblowers as malicious and politically motivated. So then he's going to describe this as political motivators to try to destroy his campaign, his office, his party, try to make it all about politics to continue to sweep this under the rug. No. God forbid people just care about these children and these victims. It's all about politics. No, it's not. No, it's not. Okay, what you're doing is evil. This guy is a scumbag. The worst of the worst. The bottom of the barrel, folks. Scumbag. A liar. Evil. Demonic. Almost unhuman. He told the London Assembly that the problem was far more complex than in other parts of the country and that young people were being exploited through county lines rather than organized group-based child sexual exploitation. So all the evidence points to this being systemic and organized, and this guy is still deflecting, still denying, because he's a scumbag and at the very least a coward. An absolute coward, spineless. These statements were made despite the Metropolitan Police holding reports of young girls being plied with, I think that's supposed to be supplied. But plied with alcohol and drugs, then raped by groups of men in hotels and other locations across the capital. A Daily Express investigation revealed that Khan had direct access to HM Inspectorate of Constabulary documents detailing exactly these patterns of offending. He read the files, yet continued to deny the existence of grooming gangs in public. So everybody else knows what's going on. He, in fact, has the exact details of what's going on. He knows about it, and yet he continued to deny it. This is Class A liar. He is the worst of the worst. This is a real demonic scumbag right here. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillip, MP, has accused Khan of facilitating a cover-up and other politicians stated that both the mayor and the Metropolitan Police have been denying grooming gangs in London. Campaigners, including whistleblower Maggie Oliver and Chris Wilde, described the capital as the last bastion of denial and warned that the scale of abuse there was more catastrophic. So, the people at the very top, even when it's all the evidence is stacked against them, and they got everybody coming at them, they're still denying it, because that's all these people know how to do. It's all they know how to do. It's not good, people. It's terrible. It really is. These people ought to go to jail for a long time. They ought to be sued out the wazoo, and, for depending on how complicit they can be found with these rape gangs and the sexual exploitation of these children, they might deserve the death penalty too. Call it harsh, but that's just the truth. It is what it is. And you're not really going to change my opinion on that, so yeah, that's that. The evidence now emerging confirms their warnings. In October 2025, the Metropolitan Police announced a review of 9,000 child sexual exploitation cases. The National Crime Agency launched Operation Beaconport to examine thousands more files nationwide after initial assessments found human errors, missed lines of inquiry, and cases wrongly dropped. Yeah, they put that human error in there to kind of be nice to these people, like a little bit, but that's not human error. That was done on purpose. They've been lying the whole time. So why would they not also lie on the documentation that they did take? When it comes to these evil people like this, like how like most of the time you always try to assume the best in people. When these people are like proven to just be liars and terrible criminals, covering up for terrible criminals, I just like to think of the most selfish, brain-dead, low IQ, evil, most harmful thing and intent these people could possibly have. And that's generally actually what it is. These people don't care about these children. They're demonic. I wouldn't be surprised if these politicians that are helping these Muslims escape the law and justice were not also involved in either the Muslim religion itself or were involved in some other sort of satanic occult. Would not be surprised in the least if that was the case, as it is with most of these pedophile politicians over there in Britain as well in the U.S. London forms a significant part of this backlog. A former Metropolitan Police detective has described industrial-scale child prostitution and grooming in the capital, with authorities aware but opting for inaction due to a mixture of incompetence, laziness, and corruption. Yeah, probably more likely the last one, corruption. Absolutely. Greedy for money, greedy for power, greedy for influence, yeah, corruption, greedy for control. It's what happens. London has the largest Muslim population in Britain. Oh, no, really, the place where it's most brutal and the worst has the largest Muslim population. Of course it does. Khan relies on significant electoral support from those communities. How about you just deport them all and then you won't have to rely on them. As well as having an ethno-religious motive to protect the public reputation of Pakistani Muslims in particular. They said it right there. He's protecting them. Why? Because he's a scumbag of the earth. There's much harsher language we could use, but this is a family-friendly podcast. Widespread acknowledgement of organized networks of predominantly Pakistani Muslim men targeting vulnerable white girls would have shattered the narrative of community cohesion that successive London administrations, none more than cons, have promoted. Oh, community cohesion. Yeah, I'm so done with this bullcrap of community cohesion, diversity is a strength. It's a bunch of lies. You let these people in and they cause problems. They're not here for cohesion. They're here for the disruption of cohesion. You want to know how you have cohesion within a community? You have a bunch of people with the same culture, with the same background, with the same religion, with the same citizenship and values established within a country, the same goals. That's how you get cohesion. The U.S. is the one place in the world where we're a melting pot of a whole bunch of that stuff, and I'd say right now our country doesn't have a lot of cohesion. Even at the beginning, our country didn't have that much cohesion. Nearly 100 years later, after the founding in 1776, 1862, 1861, we had a civil war. That's not very cohesive. And the exception to the rule that proves it may only be the Olympics. You're sticking all these people of these different ethnic backgrounds in the areas where they would excel, and in their countries they would excel in those areas, and we're just flying an American flag above them and sending them out there. So we're having the Asian community engage in the academic section. Oh, hey, look, we won gold. We're having the African American, black community, the black Americans. Okay, I don't like really using other countries or other continents in front of American because that defeats the purpose of what American means and what it actually stands for. So these black Americans, we have them, a majority of our basketball team is formed with them. They go win gold. We have the really fast Noah Lyles, African American, black American, right? He wins gold for a long time, and I didn't really watch all of the Olympics in 24, right? In 24. But we, for a long time, Michael Phelps was the best swimmer. We had him here. He won a whole bunch of gold in swimming. He was white. And so that's the advantage that America has. We have it in the sports world. Because we're taking it in competition. Because we're taking the best of each of these different ethnic groups and we're allowing them to optimize and specialize so that we can win these competitions every 4 years. And that's what happens, right? So that is maybe the one time where you could say, yeah, diversity is a strength. No, differences do not create strengths, only when they're complementary. And cultural, ethnic, and religious differences do not create cohesion. They do the opposite. And that's just the facts. That's what the math supports. As for others in authority, fear of being labeled racist paralyzed the Metropolitan Police and City Hall in the same way it did in Rotherham and Rockdale before them. Yeah, I highly doubt that it's not just more corruption, more than it's actual fear. And for the few and the some that did fear losing their job or being labeled as racist and being shamed within society and culture around them, you're just a bunch of cowards. Just more spineless people who aren't doing right just because they're worried about being called a name. You know, yeah, call me whatever you like. Call me a racist, bigot, Islamophobe, anti-Semite, a bigot, intolerant, hateful, I don't know. Call me whatever you want. At this point, you know, I'm just going to start wearing those things like a badge of honor, whether they're true or not. Because when people start calling you names for things you've said and they start trying to attack you personally for just holding common sense views and having actual morals, you know you've won the argument. You know you have the moral high ground, so I'll take it. Thank you for another title. One anonymous whistleblower told us that boys as well as girls are an especially vulnerable target for criminal gangs, typically Albanian, Somali, or Turkish. These are all places that have substantial Muslim influence. These are Muslim countries. They're not just going after the girls, they're going after the boys too, like we established earlier. They're pedophiles, they're rapists, they're murderers, and they're homosexuals. Typical. One form of evil always leads to another, greater evil. Because evil corrupts their minds, corrupts them. You engage in evil, you're more likely to engage in even more evil. That's how it works. Operating in the capital. Yet, the relevant bodies still refuse to collect data on ethnicity, willfully rendering themselves blind to the very behavioral patterns that are supposed to aid law enforcement in its pursuit of justice. This is negligence and complicit in the rape of the British people. Obstructing justice. Go hunt these people down. Lock them up. Lock them up for life. The Metropolitan Police Review, the National Crime Agency operation, and the witness accounts pouring in prove that group-based child sexual exploitation has thrived in our capital city. This inquiry records the failure without reservation. Khan and the senior leadership of the Metropolitan Police must answer for their role in this scandal until the capital confronts the truth with the same rigor now demanded elsewhere. The children of London remain at risk, and the state remains complicit. Okay, and now we have the victim testimony. This part is very not fun to read, so just bear with me here, and then after we read this first one, then we will probably skip past the other one as I'm running out of time, and we will kind of close and then talk about just how we can fix this stuff. So, yeah, fun. Alright, let's start reading here. There are thousands of survivors who could have provided evidence to our inquiry team. Below is a summary of some of the testimony provided by our brave witnesses who spoke at the inquiry hearings. Some of the witnesses have to remain anonymous for their own safety. I think this first one is one of those people that needs to remain anonymous, and so they've just opted to call her Chloe, and I don't believe that is her actual name, so that is how she will be referred to. Throughout her early childhood, Chloe was popular at school, performed well academically, and enjoyed an active social life. Although her parents separated when she was young, she describes her early upbringing as relatively stable. Following the separation, full custody of Chloe and her older brother was awarded to their father. That's kind of rare. Despite his alcoholism. Her mother, on the other hand, was often absent from her life and became homeless following the separation, and maybe that's why. Because their mother wasn't able to care for them because she was homeless. It's great. So, Chloe recalls a generally secure and supportive home environment under the care of her father. However, following his sudden death just before her 10th birthday, she moved in with her mother and her mother's new husband, a man she describes as a pedophile, by whom she was sexually abused. So, her abuse started in her home, actually. This is what happens when homes break up. It's never good for the child for parents to separate. Never, ever. It's not good. If at all possible, you should always try to work things out to save your children from situations that are not good. So, Chloe's mother caught her husband assaulting Chloe on many occasions, but did little to stop it. On one occasion, Chloe's mother caught her husband in the shower with Chloe, and instead of intervening, she closed the door and walked out. At this time, Chloe was 10 years old. Great mom, huh? Great mom. The abuse soon escalated to rape. Chloe's stepfather supplied her with alcohol and cigarettes to keep her quiet, and she began smoking cannabis. Around the same time, Chloe started truanting and spending time in the local town center with a friend unsupervised. She describes groups of Muslim men, primarily Pakistanis, aged 20 to over 50, showing them attention. So, obviously, the people, the young women, and these children, including some of these boys and stuff that were subjected to this, obviously the ones that are at greater risk, that are avoiding school, that don't have a strong community around them or a good family, and good parents, obviously are highly susceptible to this, and to these gangs, including wolf whistling and buying them alcohol. Many were taxi drivers who would take the girls into their cars and drive them around town. Just be aware, folks, if you're in one of those big cities with taxis, be aware. This stuff happens all over the place. It wasn't limited just to children. It happens to some adults too, generally women, but it's been reported that even sometimes men can be taken too. These people don't have a limit on who they're going to take and who they target, right? And then obviously in the day of Uber, just make sure that if your gut is telling you don't get in the car, don't get in the car. Be aware of what's going on around you. Don't accept food and drink from strangers. Definitely don't do drugs. It's bad for you. And it leads to other abuse, so it's not good. primarily Pakistanis, aged 20 to over 50, showing them attention, including wolf whistling and buying them alcohol. Many were taxi drivers who would take the girls into their cars and drive around the town. At this stage, there was no sexual abuse. And although the men's behavior was clearly inappropriate, Chloe and her friend, then in their final year of primary school, so 5th or 6th grade, enjoyed being treated like adults. So teach your young children that are moving into young adolescence, into their teen years, to just be aware. Be aware. That's how you really stop these things from happening. Be aware and remove yourself from situations in which abuse and exploitation can happen. The grooming soon intensified. The provision of alcohol and takeaways was accompanied by emotional manipulation with the men, many of whom were related to one another, presenting themselves as sympathetic friends to Chloe. If people are too nice and they are strangers, and they are trying to give you things, especially drugs and alcohol, and they're acting a little bit too friendly, even though you don't really know them, it's probably a good sign that they're up to no good. That's how they get people. Gotta be careful. Chloe describes this process as them mapping out, are you a vulnerable person? Physical contact, including kisses and massages, became increasingly common. Meanwhile, the abuse by her stepfather at home worsened, and her mother was all but absent as a guardian. If you are a parent out there and another parent or another adult in the household is abusing your child or abusing you, this is like your sign, hey, get out of that situation, just leave. Okay, there are people out there, there are organizations, there are law enforcement, people out there that will help you get out of this situation. Do not be complicit in it. If you are a child and you are watching this and you are currently being abused, find a way to leave the situation. I'm not in that situation, I've never been in that situation, and I know it probably can be very terrifying and scary. But it won't end until you decide to do something about it, until you leave. You gotta leave. Figure out how to get out. It's how you gotta break the cycle at some point. Better to break it earlier than later. At this time, Chloe had an aunt and uncle who lived nearby, and she often sought refuge with them. She had spent holidays with them during her earlier childhood and felt she could trust them. On one occasion, she had visited them while truanting before returning home and spending the day there while her mother and stepfather were at work. To Chloe's surprise, her uncle arrived at her house unannounced an hour later, and she invited him inside. After a brief conversation, Chloe's uncle sexually assaulted her. Chloe resisted, and he relented and left. She told her mother about the assault, and her mother reported it to the police. The police accused Chloe of lying, and no further action was taken. So here's just more of police not doing anything about these things, and it's terrible, and hopefully these people are losing their jobs and are being prosecuted. Until this incident, she had regarded her uncle as one of the best people in her life. Afterwards, there were no adults left that Chloe could confide in or seek support from. Increasingly isolated, she became more deeply involved with the groups of Muslim men she encountered in the town center. One evening, Chloe's friend suggested that they travel to a nearby town where one of the men had a hotel room. They were picked up by the man, who was drunk and under the influence of drugs, and taken to the hotel. When they arrived, hotel staff saw them but did not intervene. This is terrible. If you see stuff like this out in public, intervene. Do something about it. To not do something about it is to be complicit with it, people. We gotta be speaking out against the evil. We gotta stop it. In the room, the girls were given a potent strain of cannabis, which left Chloe, then 11, absolutely smashed. Chloe's friend was taken into another room by a group of men, and Chloe was groped by the man who remained. Chloe resisted, and he hit her. The man did not attempt to sexually assault her again, and instead threw the girls, both of whom were still intoxicated, out of the hotel and refused to drive them home. They were forced to walk. It was around midnight. Chloe did not want to go back to her home as she feared her mother would beat her for being out late, so stayed with her friend. In the early morning hours, Chloe was collected from her friend's house by the police after her mother reported her missing. Chloe lied to the police and her mother about where she had been. Chloe's mother grounded her for a month, meaning she was stuck at home with her predatory stepfather, a period she describes as torture. Lying never makes anything better. Don't do that. That's a mistake here, for sure. And it just shows you that when you get stuck in these cycles and you're being exploited like this, that it's very hard to get out of this, and it just compounds. I've already read most of this earlier today, and this podcast is going on for a very long time already. Basically, she goes on to talk about how she was constantly trapped in this cycle. She was hanging out with his friend for a while. She was sexually assaulted and raped by these Pakistani men many times, and was constantly in and out of remission from these drugs, from alcohol, and the trauma would bring her back to the drugs and alcohol. These Pakistani men would find her where she was at, still living in the town when she would move locations, after she would bounce in and out of different foster care, and later when she was a young adult living in different houses. They would come and find these places, and basically they would squat in the house, they would damage the property, and they wouldn't leave. They would get her hooked back on drugs, and then they would even pay like the housing bills and stuff so they could stay squatting there, and so that it wouldn't bring in any police investigation, and so that they wouldn't get kicked out. And just terrible, terrible stuff going on. These are animals. Like I've said throughout this podcast, they need the death penalty, and then the rest of them need to be either imprisoned or deported. These people that are implicit with it need to be imprisoned, need to be fired at the very least, and probably even better, need to be denaturalized and sent back to these places of these people that they have chose to protect and support. The best way to stop it is to, like they said earlier in this paper, eradicate them. The only thing these people understand is violence. There is no reasoning with them. Sometimes the best thing you can do for the animal is to put it down. And I don't say those kinds of things very lightly, but these extreme cases call for extreme measures, and it is absolutely necessary if we are to have a complete and good society. Within this report, there are a lot of these nice screenshots and stuff that's easily screenshotable and shareable back to your social media to provide awareness for this stuff, like little quotes in here, almost in poster form, from this woman that they are calling Chloe. Whether that is her actual name or not, I do not know. But inquiry panelist, do you know how many men abused you over that period if you had to guess? Chloe responded with hundreds, hundreds, and hundreds, and hundreds. And it's absolutely heartbreaking to see that. There's another report, it's shorter, and it comes from this lady, Fiona, but I'm just going to read the quote part, as I'm running out of time. I was beaten regularly, I was drugged, filmed being raped, and the footage was distributed. I sustained broken bones, facial injuries, and severe trauma. I was subjected to racial abuse in the community and blamed by families of perpetrators. These people are evil, and it's not just the people doing it, it's not just the perpetrators, but it's also the people that know these perpetrators. It's their families, it's their communities, it's the people of their religion that are protecting these people, that are advocating for it to be okay. These are also the same people that advocate that it is okay to have a young child as a sexual partner. These people are evil monsters, and they can't be allowed to continue. They can't be allowed to win. They can't be allowed to continue to do these things. There's another testimony by the name of a woman named Michelle. The inquiry panelist asked her, "What would you say the main issue was?" She responded with, "I don't think that they cared much about us. They didn't want to open that can of worms because it's a religion thing." I'd probably say 98% of them were Pakistani Muslim. If not, they were Iraqi or Kurdish. So the Muslim thing isn't even a question. They were all Muslim. Now, whether they came from Pakistan or not, 98% of them. So, it's these same people. The best way to deal with it is if they're just not here at all, gotta deport them, gotta get rid of them. Another report, this is Whitney. Whether that's her name or not, I don't know. She says, "My daughter told me after a while that there was a sex room in the school. I told the school about it, but they completely shut it down and said she was lying." So even the education system is failing these people. They're not supporting these children. They're not supporting these victims. They're not listening to the families of these victims. Absolutely terrible. They all need to be held accountable. Another lady named Sally. Another one named Marlon. And I think, and not all of these are victims, some of them are the parents or witnesses or family of the victims, friends of the victims that were witness to it, or found out about it, were very, very close to the victims. Another one named Wallace, Sebastian, Anna, Anna said, as he left the dock to be taken down to custody, so her abuser, taken down to custody, I was literally verbally assaulted by his sister, who shouted, "Allahu Akbar." These are animals. They have no sense of decency or care for non-Muslims. So why are we treating them with the same decency that we would treat your average neighbor? These people have nothing but ill will towards you, towards me, toward the non-Muslim world. We are literally at war with them, and we're letting them shoot us. It's just great. Another one named Taylor. Taylor had this to say: before they raped me, they would chant Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Translation of those Arabic words: In the name of Allah, the most gracious and the most merciful. Sounds pretty gracious and merciful to me. These are monsters. It's demonic. And it needs to be stopped. Another one. Marie. Jane. This just goes on and on, guys. Lily. And these two people, these last two, were talking about the stuff that would happen at these children's homes. Lily said they would toot the horn of the car and then a child would be taken to the front door by a staff member of the children's home. So these people were implicit and part of it. They were doing it. They were aiding and abetting them in doing it. They were assisting it. Doesn't sound like they were protecting these children. They should be tried for it too. The same as the people committing the actual acts. Every single one of them needs to be held accountable. Another one, Grace. Another one, Victoria. She had this to say: the local mosque where the boyfriend used to go is known for extreme radical views, and I feel that the children and young adults that are attending that mosque are being taught what to go out and do in the community and to our children at schools to preach. So this is also an institutional thing. These aren't independent actors. It's systemic. From the religious to the ethnic to the cultural. It's the whole thing. If this was happening in the Christian community by Christian men, I'd certainly want them to be taken down for it. I wouldn't want that to reflect on me and my views, that's for sure. I'd want them to be brought to justice. If they were doing that in the name of Christ. These guys, they're doing it in the name of Allah. They're doing it in the name of Islam. There needs to be something done about this. That's for sure. Another one, Eleanor. Eleanor said, I had friends that were Muslim, girlfriends, and this never happened to them. They would be in the cars with us sometimes, but the men would treat them differently. So they weren't just doing this to all the women. No, they were doing this to only the white women. It sounds like they're the racist. Sounds like they're the problem. Sounds like they're the problem. These Pakistani Muslim men, they're evil, they're racist, they're rapists, they're murderers, they're abusers, they're pedophiles, they're homosexuals, they're the whole 9 yards, all rolled up into one. But God forbid we call them out on it and try to punish them for it. Because that would make us racist, bigots, and Islamophobes. Oh no. Another one, Rachel and Jen. Jen had this to say: they have no compassion for the young girls that are out on the streets, and they see us as slags, as white trash. English pig dogs came up a lot. Muslims don't like pigs, and they don't like dogs, so they hate dogs, they hate pigs, and they put women on the same level as that, these people don't share our values. You liberals out there that are supporting these Muslims and this immigration of them, that are also claiming to be feminists, this seems pretty contradictory. But we all know why. It's because you're not actually for women, and you're not even actually for our country or equality. You're here for the downfall of America, the downfall of the UK, the downfall of Western civilization. You hate God. You hate what's right. You hate the truth. You love violence. You love chaos, and you're going to do anything to cause it, to stir it up, because you're demonic Satanists. And that's only page 87, guys. There's like 200 some pages. We're not even at page 100. Kate is another one. Man, this one's long. Unless I missed something. No, that was just a really, really long one. This is a great quote from her. Comments were constantly made suggesting that white girls and Christian girls were viewed as having fewer morals or lower value, whereas Muslim girls were described by some of the men as having dignity and higher moral standing. These comparisons were used to justify the way I was treated and to further humiliate and control me. I was also subjected to religiously charged comments designed to shame and dehumanize me, including statements implying that God had abandoned me or would reject me because of what had been done to me. These people are inhuman. When you get to the level where you are dehumanizing others, you are no longer human. You are no longer within the bounds of reason, and you ought to be removed. Violence is the only thing these people understand, folks. And remember, I'm not advocating for vigilante justice. That would make us no better. I'm advocating that our governments do what they're supposed to do, and that's protect the people. We want capital punishment, the death penalty. These people ought to be tried, convicted, and publicly hanged, burned, decapitated. Maybe bring back the pike. That'd be kind of cool. Maybe first tar and feather them. And then they have some whistleblower testimonies. Some social workers, people that opted to remain anonymous. And then they have Tommy Robinson on here too. He's a great guy. He's a national activist. Tommy Robinson documented grooming patterns after the exploitation of a close female relative at age 14. He heard hundreds of similar accounts from families across England. When he formed the English Defence League and spoke publicly, South Yorkshire police allegedly subjected him to repeated arrests and dawn raids on his family homes. He reportedly also faced fabricated charges, asset freezes, and threats that forced repeated relocations. The state treated public whistleblowing on the ethnic and religious patterns of the gangs as more dangerous than the gangs themselves. So there you go. This guy was doing his best to help defeat these gangs, stop this stuff, and the government said, hey, we're going to try to come in and stop you. That's corruption at its finest, folks. After Robertson repeatedly detailed the scale of Muslim grooming gangs across Britain, the state responded with targeted legal action that in effect silenced him. In May of 2018, he live-streamed outside Leeds Crown Court while defendants in a major grooming gang trial were entering the building. He was immediately arrested for breaching the peace and charged with contempt of court for violating reporting restrictions that protected the defendants. He was sentenced to 13 months in prison on the same day. although released after 2 months on appeal. The case was reheard in July 2019. He was resentenced to 9 months imprisonment. This sentence combines 6 months for the Leeds offense with 3 months for breaking an earlier suspended contempt order related to a similar incident at Canterbury Crown Court in 2017. The timing and nature of these prosecutions to many suggest clear retaliation. Robinson had been one of the most high-profile voices highlighting the grooming gang scandal at a time when authorities in Rotherham, Rockdale, and elsewhere were still denying its existence or suppressing evidence. Instead of investigating the gangs, the state focused its resources on imprisoning the man who had drawn public attention to them. The contempt charges ensured that his reporting on ongoing trials was criminalized while the grooming networks continued to operate. There is a prima facie case that the repeated use of the courts against Robinson was not about fair justice, but about punishing one of the individuals who forced the grooming gang scandal into the open long before official institutions were willing to act. So Robinson, great guy, despite his own freedoms being threatened and his own persecution, he was still brave and went out there and tried to do what he could to help bring awareness and to stop these guys. Ultimately, just the definition of what an actual protector and hero does. So, great guy. So, there's that. There's some more from people there. Another guy named Fred. And he just now made it to page 106. Demographics and culture. This just mainly restates a lot of what we've already read about their targets and who these people were that were involved in these grooming rape gangs, being a bunch of Pakistani Muslims and other people of Muslim heritage from other countries, and that they were targeting primarily white working class girls. Generally they were British, and it talks about how the Muslim men considered them to be inferior or trash compared to the Muslim girls, and how they were treated far worse, and while oftentimes these Muslim girls around the same age did not have anything done to them. So that's just great. Here, we'll read some of the percentages. In cases where perpetrators of Pakistani heritage were named publicly in court, records or reports, their names have consistently been Muslim in character. According to the 2021 census for England and Wales, around 93% of individuals identifying as Pakistani by ethnicity also identified as Muslim, with only about 1% following another religion. The remainder having no faith recorded. So 93% of the Pakistanis are Muslim. Alright, so that's important. Researcher Peter McLaughlin in Easy Meat 2016 compiled a comprehensive list of grooming gang convictions from 1997 to 2018 with updates and subsequent analysis, drawing from published court outcomes. His examination of names that indicated that approximately 87% of those convicted were distinctively Muslim names, which was a figure echoed in related analysis far exceeding the Muslim proportion, around 6% of the general population of Britain. So, 93% of the 100% of Muslims, that are only about 6% in Britain, were Muslim. And 87% of these guys that were convicted in these cases for these rape gangs had Muslim names. Go figure, right? The majority of these convicted groups consist entirely of men from Muslim backgrounds. These groups are predominantly Pakistani heritage, especially when the group exceeds 10 or more members. The larger group size dynamic of Pakistani perpetrators is on display in major prosecutions and official reviews from Hoklesett, Rockdale, Rotherham, Huddersfield, Oxford, Telford, and others. Other convictions have involved groups primarily composed of Muslims from non-Pakistani origins, demonstrating that the issue is not necessarily confined to one ethnic group. So, basically what they're saying is it doesn't really have to do with the Pakistanis or any of these other ethnic groups that were involved. It really is just defined and characterized by the fact that they are Muslim. So, yeah, there it is. It's just pretty much just these Muslims that seem to be the problem. Other convictions involve groups primarily composed of Muslims from non-Pakistani origins, demonstrating that the issue is not necessarily confined to one ethnic group. 2 Somali origin gangs in Bristol, a mainly African heritage gang in Banbury, 3 Iranians in Chelmsford, 3 Syrians, and 1 Kuwaiti in Newcastle, 2 Turkish men in Somerset, a Romanian rape gang in Rotherham, the large Newcastle Operation Sanctuary case involving 17 men and 1 woman from diverse Muslim backgrounds: Albanian, Kurdish, Bangladeshi, Indian, Turkish, Iranian, Iraqi, Pakistani, and Eastern European heritage. Nearly all published names were Islamic. So almost all of their names were Islamic, and probably all of them were Islamic, even if they didn't have traditional Muslim names. These patterns are drawn from judicial proceedings, sentencing records, official inquiries, such as those in Rotherham, Rockdale, and others, and public reporting on concluded cases, recent developments, including ongoing reviews and data audits. Continue to examine the scale, characteristics, and patterns of such offending. With regard to the scale of the crimes, this is reflected in conviction records, police data from relevant force areas, and audits, all of which note overrepresentation of South Asian / Pakistani heritage men in certain group-based cases, while acknowledging data limitations on ethnicity. So even with the numerous cover-ups and lack of documentation, they still found in like all of these cases that 90% of these guys were Pakistani Muslims, and then the other groups, they were just from other countries, but they were still Muslim. Wow. Limitations on ethnicity nationwide. Smaller non-Muslim groups often feature different dynamics or victim profiles compared with the classic multi-offender grooming model in larger operations. The term Asian has frequently been applied in media, official statements, and public discourse to describe the perpetrators in grooming gang cases across Britain. This broad labeling can be misleading, however, because Britain hosts a substantial number of non-Muslim Asian populations, such as Hindus, Sikhs from India, Buddhists from Japan, and Christians from the Philippines and Vietnam. These populations have, with only very rare exceptions, had no involvement in these offenses. In fact, members of these communities have more often appeared as victims than as perpetrators in the grooming gang cases that have come to light. So then they try to cover it up by just labeling them very broadly as Asian, but that's just not the case. They're Muslim, and most of them are Pakistani. And they're being caught in their lies, they're being caught in what they are doing, and hopefully justice will prevail, which we know it will, because justice always prevails. Evil will never defeat good, they will never defeat the human spirit, and they will not defeat God. He's undefeatable. And that's something we can take hope and pride in, and knowing that God will bring about justice in the end. Even if these people escape the justice here on earth for a brief time, they will one day have to face their Maker. And then hopefully they will be burning in hell if they do not repent and change their ways. So, yep. I do not feel sorry for any of these people, any of these perpetrators, any of these criminals. Wow. Just kind of seeing if there's anything else in here that I wanted to read. A lot of this is very tough. Just a lot more stories in here, and different quotes and people talking about being forced into Islamic marriages, being abused, being raped, and being trafficked. And then they have more statistics. The 250,000 figure is not a precise count. No such count exists because the British state has failed to record it, but we may regard it as a conservative estimate that accounts for the organized, repeated nature of the abuse. Many girls raped hundreds of times by multiple perpetrators, and decades of institutional concealment. Analysis of 264 convictions for group-based child sexual exploitation from 2005 to 2017 found that 84%, that is 222 offenders out of the 264, were South Asian, with the vast majority being Pakistani Muslim. Only 7% were white and 8% were black. So, coming from other groups, non-Muslim groups. Additional context from expert community includes statements by Dr. Taj Harji and an imam at the Oxford Islamic congregation who observed that virtually every individual in these grooming gangs appears to be Muslim, estimating that 95% of those involved are of Muslim faith. And that's probably being conservative and generous. It's probably closer to 99%. As previously stated, Peter McLaughlin's research indicates that approximately 87% of rape gang convictions were of people with distinctly Muslim names. These figures stand in marked contrast to the much smaller proportion of Pakistan or Muslim communities within the overall population of modern Britain. Muslims approximately 6.5% and Pakistanis around 2.1%, according to the most recent census data. So 2.1% of the population is responsible for 95% of the gang rape, and 6.5% of the population is responsible for probably upwards of 95, 99% during that time frame of 2005 to 2017 were responsible for 84% of the offenses. So that's great. Sounds like the easiest way to take care of this is just to ship them off. If they're not in the country, they can't commit the crime. This is just appalling. It makes me sick to my stomach. Young children being abducted from their homes, people being abused, raped, killed. The trauma that these victims must be suffering and have suffered, and the suffering and trauma that their families have is crazy. They have a whole section on here on Muslim supremacism, talking more about how Muslims view Muslims as being superior to all those that aren't, and all the things that they say and justify doing to people that are non-Muslim. And it goes through their different points of the Muslim faith, and these several different points. Starting with Muslim supremacism, the us and them mindset, superiority and dominance of men over women, and it shows all the different little Quran verses that they have to justify their claims and their treatment of these people. The seclusion of women, forced marriage in the age of consent, which it really shouldn't say and the age of consent because they don't have an age of consent, it's more like the absence of it. Again, they're pedophiles. And then they have their section on female sexuality, which was already earlier described as they view it as being evil inherently, and that is why they use that to justify a lot of the things that they do. And then one of the last ones is their jihad, which is what they would call their holy war, and sex slavery. And then they have the dimatud, Islam's treatment of conquered non-Muslim peoples. Now they don't need to conquer you with the sword; they do it with their words and politics and fear-mongering. Islamic clan culture. There's a category in here. And then they talk about the homegrown enabling factors, Islamophobia, and political correctness. That is the number one highest cause and effect for all of these problems. The desire to be politically correct, the desire to include these people that clearly do not share our values, that hate us, and that desire to destroy us, and we let them in. And then we don't want to kick them out or tell them no, because we'll be viewed as racist or Islamophobic. We'll screw all of that. It's time for them all to go home. I've said it once, I've said it before, and that means I've probably said it 1,000,000 times. They need to just go home. We need to try the ones that are criminals already, give them the death penalty or life imprisonment, but better than that, denaturalization and deportation, and then deport the rest of them. You want to have a separate religion, you want to have different values than the values that we hold here in the Western world, you want to act like animals, and then treat everybody else like they're your property, well, you can be treated just as inhumane as you want to treat us. Because that's what these people understand is violence. So, let's give it to them. That's what they want. They want their holy war. So let's take it to them. Talks about the corruption stuff, the law. It's talking about a lot of the police, and then just the different framework and government, support for these victims, and how that's failed miserably, and how that needs to be a lot better, which I agree, needs to be a lot better. We should never further victimize the victims. We should help them get back on their feet and give them the support and the therapy and the path to rehabilitation necessary to live a good and fulfilling life. And then it talks about party politics, which obviously we know that the liberals are more for letting these people in. That's a big problem, but the Republican or conservative parties in our nation, in Britain, they're just kind of complicit in it. They just kind of let things happen. And then the left further pushes us into the gutter. So they gotta go. We gotta get people in offices that are actually for the people, that don't fear perception of being called racist, for actually just protecting the people that they are sworn in to serve. Talks a lot about their different parties. It talks more about the national inquiry, and talks about the Muslims invading the different ranks within some of these parties and becoming politicians so that they can enact laws and protect their fellow rapists and pedophiles. And that's a problem too, which is another reason why they need to be denaturalized. They can't end up in office if they're not a citizen, and they can't be here to commit the crimes if they're not a citizen and they're deported. And then the people can't re-offend if the death penalty is handed out. So that's great. And what I'd highly recommend, and what these people are recommending here too, anyway. So they have a whole section on here of pregnancy, the abortion, and children born of rape. And I'd certainly hope that they're more just talking about how to help these people that have these children, and then the dealing with sexually transmitted diseases and infections, how they can help these people, and how they can help the future children and avoid these perpetrators of having rights to these kids that are born, and then it was also just talking about how if you're a child of one of these victims, you're more likely to be a victim yourself too. So that's just not good, and obviously that's why we need to stop this so it doesn't continue. And then it talks more about the impact on the survivors. There's still a lot more pages. And then it goes into the conclusion, and just basically recaps. Then they get down to the recommendations, and they're aspiring to restore justice, eliminate the gangs, and protect the next generation. There needs to be a criminal justice response. They give guides for the current sentencing. Rupert Lowe, MP, the guy that is heading this thing up, he's also called for a referendum on it reintroducing the death penalty for the most heinous crimes. There is a case to be made that this is more than proportionate where rape gangs are concerned. Yes, that's based. That is based. Absolutely based. Bring back the death penalty. God gave it to governments to use to protect the people, and it naturally acts as a deterrent from any future perpetrators. Yes. Good. And then they go on to talk about immigration, deportations, and denaturalizations. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yep, that's what we want. And then they talk about reform to help these people, to help the victims some more, and to help them with their trauma. And then they've talked about overseas task force to go rescue these people that have been trafficked to other countries like Pakistan. So that's good. Go get these people back, go save them. That's good, that needs to happen. And then we probably need to bomb these people, bomb these countries, these abominations, these demonic groups off the earth so they can't do it anywhere else, but that might be a little bit extreme. So, just some thoughts. And then they talk about the family and placing a heavy emphasis on family and having a protective family to help these people that are more susceptible, and to make sure that other families are just aware that this stuff has been going on, and to make people aware of it so that the best way to avoid it, obviously, is to avoid the situation entirely. So oftentimes you can protect yourself from these kinds of things by just being smart and avoiding bad situations and areas where bad things can happen. And then they're talking about laws that would allow them to actually collect the data, including for the ethnicity and religion of these people in these different cases and stuff, so that it's easier to file, it's easier to find out who's doing it, and hold people accountable. So that's all good. And then it talks about basically saving some of these victims from being charged criminally. When it talks about crimes committed by child victims of grooming at the behest of their abusers, lack the mens rea, which is guilty mind, to count as criminal in the active conventional sense. So if they are coerced or forced to commit crimes, they're not tried for that. And basically that's thrown out, so that's good. And then they're talking about putting in laws that would proven rapists forfeit their parental rights, and then an act that would ban Sharia marriage, basically banning the way a lot of Muslims do marriage, which would do well, and also just kind of ban a lot of like the Muslim way of life in Western civilization, which would do a great job in deterring these people from even coming here in the first place, so that's always good. If you can redirect these criminals and keep them isolated to their own countries, and then perhaps maybe they die off, or if they ever start a war, well then we can use that to justify to blow them off the earth. That's kind of fun. But again, like I said, a little bit extreme, but extreme cases call for extreme measures. We talk more about health care, taking care of these victims and their children that are born from it. And then they talk about private prosecutions and civil litigation, which would be for suing the social workers, the police officers, the politicians and others, and like education workers for doing nothing about it, even though they knew. So that's good. Those people need to be held accountable too, even if the law can't technically hold them accountable. And then it talks about the next steps, about how they're going to continue this inquiry and how they're going to publish it everywhere they can, and they're going to start taking the steps to fix this stuff and to go prosecute these people and go after them, which is good. And then Rupert Lowe thanks us for reading and for looking at this and for sharing it and to just continue to support the message. And then there's one last survivor victim that shared a non-hearing case. There's another one, Claire, and then I guess a girl that opted to definitely remain anonymous because it says Tinkerbell on there, and I doubt that that's somebody's actual name, although it could be, but I doubt it. There's another one, and then there was an anonymous interim manager that was a whistleblower, another anonymous survivor and whistleblower, Jojo, a parent of a survivor, Phoebe, a survivor, Ross is the parent of Phoebe, Celeste is a survivor, and more survivor quotations. And then it talks more about the institutional failures, mainly of the police and then NHS services and social care. And then the failures of these children's homes and education, and then the taxi licensing, council licensing, just all of these people. And then it gives a list of the areas that gangs are known to have operated in, and that probably are still operating in, if all of them haven't been caught yet. So, and that would be more for the people that are in the UK. Obviously, it would be kind of hard to avoid some of these areas, sure, and especially if you live there, you can't just get up and move most of the time. So, yeah. That's a lot. 218 some pages. Thanks for watching and listening. If you found this to be informational and of value and worth your time, and if you care about getting the message out and supporting this cause to bring these criminals, these monsters to justice, and to continue to do what is right, I just ask you just to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this with people you know. I'm going to leave the documents linked in the description, and that'll be there for your viewing and for you to share with others. So, I'm just going to take a moment and pray real quick. Dear Lord, I just thank you that you've enabled me to just be a spreader of your truth and a spreader of your word. Lord, our hearts go out to these victims and these people that have been abused and that are still being trafficked right now. I pray that you would just be with them, and that you would provide safety, and that you would comfort them, and that you would allow them to know that you still love and care about them, and that you're watching over them, Lord, even while they're going through these horrific things. I pray that you would bring these criminal monsters to justice, Lord. I pray that you wouldn't let them escape, and that you would just absolutely eviscerate and eradicate them, Lord. Bring about your justice, and that you're in your holy wrath upon these people that have done these horrible and inhumane things, Lord. But I also pray that if it is possible. And not so that they can escape the justice, but that before they receive the justice, if they do indeed receive the death penalty, Lord, that you would show these people your truth, and that you still even have some love for them, Lord. And that you sent your Son to die for them too. And that they would come to the saving knowledge and grace that you show to all of us. Because if we're being totally and completely honest, we've all deserved hell. We've all rejected you, Lord. And that it's only through your Son that we can find redemption. And so even though these people have done some very monstrous and evil things, we don't ignore that at all. We don't believe that they should be allowed to escape justice. We also know that you're still holding out your hand to them to save their soul. And so even though they ought to forfeit their life, we pray that you just save as many souls as you can. And that you're the only one that can change their hearts and minds now, Lord. So I pray that you would do all of these things, and that you would give us peace, and that you would protect us. In Jesus' name, amen. Alrighty, thank you. As always, I'm your host, Bob Morsey of the Babble Pod, signing off.